Okay, once again, I was muted, sorry. Hello guys, once again, and we're going to play Outward tonight with a special guest. I will let him introduce himself because I butchered his name in the past, so I'm going to let him say his name properly so you can hear it from the man himself. Hi Guillaume, what's up? Okay, I said it.
I'm sorry, but people can't hear you right now.
It should be fine. It's a bit. There's a delay, I think, but it should be.
No, they're telling you right now that they can't hear you, but they can see.
We can hear.
Yeah,
Okay. How about now? How about now, guys? Can you hear us now? I think it's fine now.
I'm sorry, but yeah, I think they can hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Want to do this again?
Yeah, let's do it for the third time. Why not? Hello guys, what's up? And tonight we're playing Outward with a really special guest, the CEO of 9 Studio. Once again, I almost butchered your name. Guillaume will join us for a session of Outward tonight, and I'll let him introduce himself because I butchered his name in basically all of my videos. So I'll just
Yeah,
let
don't
him
worry about
introduce
it.
himself.
You know what's funny? You say you've butchered my name,
Yeah.
but my family name in French, Boucher, is actually butcher. So my name is Guillaume Boucher-Vidal. I'm the founder of 9 Studio, and
Okay.
and apparently there's echo right now. They can hear you twice.
Really?
Or is it me that they can hear they
Streaming,
can hear twice?
streaming is hard.
Streaming technical issues
This
always
is
happening.
yeah. This is why I don't stream regularly, guys, because it's scuffed as hell, man. Okay, I muted myself on the stream, so it should be fine right now, I guess. Okay, we'll wait for someone to answer that, but okay, I'm in the game. So the original plan was to play the game together, but Guillaume has some technical issues, so that's not gonna happen. You're just going to watch my gameplay. But more importantly, we're going to talk about the game in general, the upcoming DLC, the Soroboreans, and yeah, some general stuff about the game design. So where should we start? The echo went away. No echo here. Okay, so it
Well,
seems to be fine.
there's one question that Ardent Gamer has been asking a few times already: is how did you get me here? How did you get me on your stream?
Well, I have strong connections, man. What can I say? Yeah, there is a. You will explain it better, right? There is a thing called Outward Game Night, and basically every streamer can apply to get in, right? Wait, my game is kind of lagging on my screen. That should not happen. But it
But
says
that's really the
excellent.
gist. That's really the gist of it. We decided to have this initiative of Outward Game Night, where we join with streamers who are interested in Outward and have an opportunity to talk directly with someone from the development company, so that you can ask questions about game design, intent, maybe some clarification and stuff like that. And it's already been a pleasure to participate a bit like this, and we will see for how long we can keep doing this. And as soon as we had this opening, I reached out myself to Click for Gameplay, asking whether or not it would be possible to have us, because from the very start, before the game was even launched, you were already enthusiastic
Yeah, I
about the
made a
game.
few videos, just a few videos about that.
And just a few.
Yeah, just a few. Yeah, this whole thing, this whole game night thing is, I think it's actually amazing because transparency with the consumers and the game companies are always really important for the success of basically any game. I think you will agree, right?
Of
Yeah,
course.
so that's great. And so yeah, guys, if someone streams, like basically if you're doing some casual streams or something, you can apply for Outward Game Night, so you can talk with Guillaume as well. So yeah, obviously everyone will want to know about the upcoming DLC, right? So
Of course they will.
yeah. So if any of you guys didn't know already, there is an upcoming big DLC coming for Outward. Just let me check. Is the game okay, guys? Is it not dropping frames or anything weird? No?
Yeah, it's running fine.
Yeah? Okay. The screen is confusing me, man. Anyway, yeah, the Soroboreans. I think the most
Yes.
important question that we can ask here is the release date. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's a hard one, isn't it?
Yep, let's start with the hard
we
question.
we are very careful about not revealing a release date too soon. In the past, we had to push further down the release date, because at 9 we really never do any kind of crunch. And so if we say we're going to be out by that date, if we're not sure, it could be a risk to our team. So we are always willing to be absolutely certain, and even then it can still happen to have a delay, but we're just giving ourselves a chance essentially.
That's great.
So one thing we did say was it should be released before summer. It should be in spring. So that's pretty soon.
So guys,
but will it be in May? Will it be in June? We'll
May
tell you
confirmed,
once
okay.
we know ourselves.
Yeah, before summer is just fine, at least in my opinion. Okay, that's not too far away, guys. The biggest feature, let's call it, I guess, is it's the new area, like right, an antique plateau, right? And
yes, of course.
Okay, let me see. The first question I had in mind when it comes to this DLC area. Like I said, I got it on my phone, and this is going to look a bit stupid, but I didn't manage to transfer my questions to my PC. So this is
You
gonna
would have
be
told
fine.
them; they wouldn't have noticed.
Never mind. I'm transparent as well. So yeah. Okay. So obviously, the one of the biggest feature besides the newest area, Antique Plateau, is the new element corruption, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes, that's correct.
the thing I want to know is how big of a role that element is going to play in general, and will we see corruption in other parts of the game as well, or is it's just going to remain
In the new area?
In the new area, yeah.
That was a tough question we had internally. Like
I already know
ideally,
I already know the answer, but I think people want to know because I listen to you speak in the other stream. So yeah.
yeah. So yeah, we thought about it and we decided it was best to keep the corruption only in the new areas, because if someone want to play with a friend who does not have the DLC, like it would be incompatible to have them together. And it was important for us to not kind of pressure someone into needing the DLC to play with their friends. And also from a technical point of view, it's also simpler that way to kind of keep them separate. We try to have as few interactions as possible with the original regions, in part because the game has been released for a year, right?
Yeah.
So they've seen those areas a lot, and they will expect the new quest line to take place more importantly in the Antique Plateau, and less so in the old towns and regions.
Yeah, I think that's smart actually, because it doesn't you don't feel pushed to buy the DLC, right? You don't feel forced to buy the DLC in order to play with your friends.
It has to be their decision. It has to not feel right off the bat as something that you're begrudgingly buying. It has to be something you want to buy.
Yeah, that's actually smart. Okay, that's fine by me. I don't know about you guys. Let's see some question from the chat. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Transparency builds believability, so that's good. Yeah, man. That's just what I said. That's great. Transparency is always great. There is a interesting question about the caravans. Redding Tufink asks, Soroboreans can travel quickly, so we can travel with their caravans. So can we travel with their caravans in the DLC? That's an interesting question.
I am not allowed to give the answer to that question, but that itself kind of answers in part the question. So there will be, in some limited fashion, ways to interact with the caravanners.
That's interesting, man. That's really interesting. Okay, I'm really excited now for that, because that wasn't on my mind at all. Okay.
Like the way to get to the Antique Plateau inside the town of Armaton is actually to pay the Soroborean Caravaneer.
Oh, okay.
To go with them back to the city. That's how you're gonna reach there.
Okay. Okay. Do we still need travel rations? I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that would be weird to not have travel rations as a cost. Okay, it's really hard to focus on the damn game and ask this question, so I'm going to look like an idiot.
It's fine if you die.
It's really, you know what's stupid? Because hey, that's the guy that makes a lot of combat guides and stuff, and look at him failing in this fight.
With the first enemy encounter.
Yeah, it's embarrassing, man. Okay, I hope that people are actually listening to us and not watching that much. Okay, somebody asks, Sebastian asks, will there be better modding tools for the game?
Sadly, no. We're trying to have like as direct communication as we can with the modders. We're making ourselves available when they have specific questions about technical stuff on the Discord server, especially in the modding channel. But we just don't have the manpower to support tools. And it's not just about making modding tools. It would be about making them and then maintaining them.
Every new build of the game will just break the current mods, right? That's how it works.
Well, not necessarily every time,
yeah.
but
when something changes drastically, right?
Yeah.
Or something.
And we don't have the resource to be careful about not breaking specific mods. Like if we had more programmers, it would be easier to kind of do things in a way that can be a slightly more complex, but just to preserve the integrity of mods. But there's only three programmers now working at 9dots. So
guys, 9dot Studio
really
is a small team that makes well, since Outward, right? I didn't play. Okay, I'm gonna be honest. I didn't play any previous games from your studio, so I don't want to talk about that. But you can mention your previous works. I know you did. What was the name? It was like Space Game or something, right?
Yeah, God Factory Wingman.
Yeah, and there's some Easter eggs in Outward from that game. Am I correct?
Well, the last armor, well, not the last, but like the Tsar set is actually influenced by the design of the Chorians, which were highly defensive alien species in God Factory. There's also the sword brand is actually a direct reference to our first game, which is also called Brand, which is about making a sword fit for a king.
Yes, I remember that actually when I was doing a research for that. Yeah, one really interesting question about DLC. Well, I say it's interesting because I came up with it, but okay. Will the new area contain a lot of secrets or Easter eggs like the old world? Can we find at least a couple of Easter eggs?
Well, you can expect at least the same level of rewards for exploration.
Okay.
So players who are interested in digging a little more should be finding something.
Okay, so that's more than enough. Okay. Okay, I got you. Is the price for the DLC already known? I think not yet, right?
No, we have not revealed it yet. It's difficult. We're looking at different factors, how we think it's going to be received and all that. So all I can say is, like, we've already announced that it's a paid DLC. At least there's been a lot of questions about that. And we've been working on the game for like more than a year post release. So
yeah, we
at
got
that
some
point,
big content patches, big free content patches, and I got videos for that. Yeah. So let's just say for all new viewers who maybe just heard for Outward just for the first time ever, Outward is a survival action open world RPG. And there is a big DLC coming really soon for the game, so it's probably the best time to hop into the game if you didn't play it already. And you can play it with your friend in co-op and online co-op and couch co-op, split screen co-op, which is also actually the thing I want to talk about as well, because I think you were kind of influential with that feature, because we started to see I would say more RPGs including more. I will just not quote. I will just mention one game that I saw using the couch co-op feature. Was it?
I don't think it's possible that we were an influence for that.
That started. That started
because
before,
like it's a decision you have to make from the very start. Like you don't decide to add split screen to an open world RPG unless unless you're very early in development. So, but if we had some influence on future titles, time will tell. It would certainly be cool because I want to have more games I can play with my wife.
That's nice.
Um,
You know what's
but
funny?
but we'll
Funny.
see.
I got a bunch of comments on Outwards. They were like, "Oh, I'm playing this with my wife. I'm playing this with my girlfriend, and we're having a bunch of fun." And I was like, "Okay, I need a girlfriend."
Just to have someone to play Outward with, you know?
Amongst other things. Okay. I think we should still focus on the DLC a bit more until we move to some other topics. So obviously we got the big feature of the. Let me just kill this. I can't focus on talking. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
It's gonna be dead soon.
Yeah. Nope. I got blue sand armor, which is OP for this zone, I guess. Yeah. The big feature of the DLC, we're getting two new classes: the speedster and the hex mage. I think that a lot of people will be really interested in those two new classes because it opens up the possibility for a lot more class combinations, right?
Yes.
So, are there any changes that will happen on the global level when it comes to breakthrough points, or everything is going to be the same, but we just get
It's
two
going to
extra
be the
new
same.
classes?
You will
Okay.
still have only 3 breakthroughs, and that means that if your character already has used all 3 breakthrough points, you won't be able to get the second half of the skill
Okay.
trees from the new trainers, but can still get the skills that are
Yeah, yeah.
pre-breakthrough.
So it's
And keep in mind that the game is always encouraging the player to start new characters with the
yes.
legacy system, with the fact that there's multiple quest lines and that you can do all of them. So it's really a game that encourages you to try new playthroughs, new ways of playing the game, and Antique Plateau is just adding up on reasons to rediscover your experience, and also at the same time uh, live the experience of when you're more knowledgeable in a game, you start a new experience, how different it is from when it was the first time.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. The game actually encourages multiple playthroughs, even from the story side, right? Which is not mentioned that often. Most of the reviews that I watched were mentioning the replay value because of the gameplay, but maybe not a lot of people know that there is multiple endings of the game, and which is kind of obvious because there are multiple factions, but people are, I think, used to having just one predetermined ending in the game these days. Well, not all of them, of course, but so yeah, people should also know that Outward has multiple endings, right?
Yes, and
Oh, I can go back there.
I like the end point for all the 3 first factions was mostly like different perspective on the
Yeah,
same ending and has the same final battle.
yeah, multiple branching paths until
Yeah.
the final chapter, right? That's what I meant to say.
However, the story for the Antique Plateau will
Yeah.
lead you somewhere else for the very end.
Okay, okay, that's interesting. You're okay. I know you can't talk much
Yeah, I'm
in
not gonna be
detail,
saying more
yeah.
than that.
So you're choosing
I'm
your
already
words really
revealing a lot.
carefully, which is kind of interesting to. I like to speculate a lot in my videos, and I'm always trying to hit the break when it's getting absurd, right? I don't like to talk. I don't like to go really in depth with speculation, but just basically, okay. I think I was really on point when it. Okay, that's the next topic for our conversation. The enchanting system. I saw that table and I basically didn't have any information about that, and I was like, that's probably the for enchanting stuff, right? That was the first thing on my mind when that first picture
Maybe.
leaked. So, well, since you talked about it in your dev diary update,
Yeah, in the diary we
yeah,
see
yeah,
us talking.
you already
Yeah.
revealed that, so it's too late for being secretive.
I was wondering if we could see me or the character interacting with an actual enchanting table.
You did. You just placed an item and there was not. I can't remember quite. Didn't watch it for a few days, but there was a scene where you put the item on the table, I guess, and just
Yeah.
uh, how the, can you talk about that or not? Does it work? Okay, I'm stuttering like hell. Enchantment system. At first, I thought it works very similar to the regular enchantments before we had any info about the table and stuff. I thought it's going to work like fire rags or ice rags, but I was completely wrong. So
Yeah, it's
it's
very different.
it's very different. Okay, so we're going to need some unique items to use for the enchanting system, or
The process itself of how to enchant things is something that we are purposefully keeping rather obscure. So I'm not gonna be telling you how to enchant, but in terms of like what it adds on items, the way it works is almost any piece of, well, no, all pieces of equipment can be enchanted. That
all
includes
pieces. Oh,
shields,
that's interesting.
bows, trinkets, armors, like anything that you can equip on your character can be enchanted, but not all enchantment can go on all pieces. Some enchantments are very specific to certain types of items, and other enchantments are more wide and can be applied on more
Are
different pieces of
enchantments?
equipment.
Will enchantments be mostly passive, or are we going to get some active stuff, active skills, or just
Oh yeah, it's
passive
passive.
bonuses? Passive, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so passive bonuses, right?
Yeah. And one thing that the one question that was brought up that I feel I want to be transparent about,
Okay.
because there was a piece of armor that was shown to have changed appearance after being enchanted.
Oh,
That's
that's
not going to
nice.
be
Not
true of all.
oh,
That's not going to be true of all pieces of equipment. It's just that some specific items uh, will get a change in their appearance according to the enchantment they get.
oh, I actually didn't know that. Okay, that's great. So there's still gonna be items that will change based on your upgrades, based on your
Yeah, it's a
enchantment upgrades, right?
minority. It's not all of them because it would have been like such a huge
Forgot to
job.
repair. Forgot to repair. Sorry. So yeah, there we go, guys. Let's pick some random question from the chat, shall we? Will the DLC come to consoles as well at the same time as PC?
Well, it's what we are planning. If we are hitting a snag with, say, the certification on consoles, maybe it's possible that we would be releasing on PC first because we are working on the, like Nine Dots is working on the PC version, and it's another studio that takes care of porting
Yeah,
it to console.
it's
So
usually how
because
it
we are
works
done
with
first,
smaller companies, right?
yeah,
You're not doing the port to consoles yourself, right?
yeah, that's correct. So it's possible, like in the sense that it is a possibility for us to decide to release the DLC on PC first, on console second. But the problem with doing that, even from a consumer point of view and not just a marketing point of view, is there might be some things we have to change in the PC version so that it runs more smoothly on weaker PCs than on consoles.
Okay.
So if we release it way sooner on the PC and then we change it after that, it can lead to some angry responses if they feel like something was taken away because they preferred it in one way or the other.
It's really interesting when you mention that because I remember some really old videos about Outward. The game looked really differently
Mhm.
from what we know now, right? And there was a fire effect on the fireball, right?
Mhm.
That melted snow in its path
Yes,
when you cast it. And the reason you had to remove that, correct me if I'm wrong, is the technical limitations on consoles, right?
it's one of the main reasons, but at the same time, it revealed how difficult it was to run on low-end PCs as well.
Okay.
Making a game that runs on a wide range of PCs is just a smart move. And having two different types of shaders for the snow would have been a lot of work to kind of maintain through development and just to have as an option for lower end PCs. So it just made more sense for us to have only one type of snow that was sadly not as cool from a the wow factor of seeing the snow that melts when you use a
Yeah,
car.
when I watch.
Actually, there was also like steps in the snow when you would walk, and say if you shot an arrow at a deer and it fled, or a pearl bird, it would leave steps in the snow so you could follow them,
Oh damn, that would be
because
great for
that
hunting.
that was really
Okay,
cool.
don't tell us that. That's okay. I want
I
that in the
know,
game
I
now.
know. It hurts so much to remove cool features like that. But when we've shown that snow, like the game had been in development for less than 3 months,
Yeah.
so and we ended up working on the game for 4 years. So of course there's gonna be a lot of changes, and I feel that the game's final look is way better than what it was when
Yeah,
we got
yeah, yeah.
started.
That's correct.
Um,
The
so
colors
it's
were
always
kind
a
of
give and
off.
take. We optimize and we see what's the best decision for the game, and sometimes you lose something but you gain something. One other aspect is, and I did touch a bit on that on the dev diary, was we wanted to have the Soroboreans from the start. We wanted to have 4 factions,
Okay.
but we ended up doing 3, and after, because the game was successful, we were able to make the 4th one. And people were like, "Oh, so the game was just smaller in every way, and you're just making it back to the size it should have been." And it's not exactly that, because when we decided to remove one faction in one region, we made the other regions we had more compact with content. We added more dungeons, we added more creatures, we added more equipment, because we had freed some resource from no longer doing another quest line in another region.
That's really interesting because people are, well, in the last couple of years, people are usually used to get an unfinished game, at least from AAA companies. You get an unfinished game, and then with day one DLCs and
Mm.
crap like that. So people are really cautious when it comes to DLCs in general. So I think that reaction is kind of is expected, right? But the DLC, you just didn't have enough manpower and time to do that, to do the
Yeah,
Soroboreans DLC in
it,
time
it,
and
it
place it
was
in the game.
either that or not doing outward, really.
Yeah.
That's what was the situation for us. And I do think that, like, even on AAA productions, one thing that people don't take into account is that sometimes, like, they get the game approved before the day one DLC was done, but it takes so long to put in place, especially when there's retail distribution worldwide, that by then they have time to bring some new features, and they can even plan those new DLC stuff uh, to be ready on time. So it's not necessarily that they took a part away from the game before it was released.
It's not
Sometimes
cut
it's just that
content.
between the
Yeah.
time when they finished it and when it was released, there was enough time to do day one DLC. That also can happen, and it's like it's more common than people think.
Yeah. If people don't know, well, some people do, but the whole world of Ori is massive, right? It's much bigger than the stuff we got in the game.
Yes.
And even with the DLC, that's like, I would pick a random number, like 50% of the whole world.
About that much, a little bit
Yeah, okay,
less, I'd
little
say.
bit
But
less. Yeah,
yeah, like we had place for 8 different cities in the original world map of Ori. And
8 different cities.
yeah, there was one floating city, Orochi. There was Habub,
Oh
and there
yes,
was
yes, yes. I talked about that. Yeah.
Descaraburan, Sirocco. Those are all towns that are not yet available
Oh, it's not.
as playable, but they do exist in the universe of Ori and in the game's lore.
That actually brings us to my next question. Okay, first I'm going to ask you some question from the chat because I don't want to be the only one who asked the question here. Okay,
Sure.
let's see. Wait.
One question that I saw
Yeah,
pop a few
go
times
ahead.
was if the current virus situation has affected development
Oh,
for
that's an
Nine
interesting
Dots.
question.
It did, because testers are usually working all in the same space, and because of considerations for non-disclosure agreements and avoiding leaks and stuff like that, you usually don't work from home. So any kind of certification to send the game to be ready for release can be a bit delayed, and it's been much harder to find available teams to test the game. So that is one way in which it affects us.
So it did. Okay.
One other way that would have affected us a lot for the first DLC was if we hadn't had the voiceovers ready before the COVID-19 breakout,
Okay.
because
Is there
voice
something you
actors
need?
need to go into an actual studio to be recorded,
Oh yeah.
and that of course would not be considered as an essential service or whatever. So we wouldn't have been able to record the voiceovers, and that could have delayed a lot
Yeah, that makes
as well.
sense. So it did slow down the development a bit, right?
Yes, it did, and also we decided to work. Well, even if we had decided that eventually it was forced by our government, and that's fine. But we work from home now, but usually work from a shared office. So there's some adaptation that comes with that, of course. But I still feel like we are very fortunate in the gaming industry in general. We're not that affected unless you're a tester or an actor. So like I'm not one who's gonna be complaining when there's people who are like getting sick for real and or losing their job. It's much more difficult for them than it is for us.
Yes.
I think it's more like right now more than ever the role of video games and entertainment in general is put under the spotlight
Is
because
there
people
something
need
you
that
need?
to think about something else than all the
Yeah.
shit that's happening out there.
Yeah, you're totally right, and I agree completely. So it's still great that you guys are actually managing to work from home, because there are a lot of folks who don't actually get to work in these tough times. It's really hard. It can be really hard, but working from home is actually a blessing in some cases. But in general, it's really hard with all this stuff going on. It's crazy, but I'm glad you can actually manage to get your team
What
to
can
work
I
from
do
home.
for
So
you?
Yeah,
so that's great.
yeah, we're lucky.
Yeah. There was one interesting question. Someone asked, "How long is the DLC?"
You
Oh,
mean to complete the storyline, maybe?
Uh,
Um,
but maybe in general, how much hours will the normal
well,
playthrough last?
yeah, it's a difficult one for us to judge. Like when we
People play
released
the game
Outward,
different ways, right?
we thought that the game would be like 20, 30 hours for one playthrough, and that people would be like the most dedicated players would do 3 different playthroughs and maybe clock in 100 hours of gameplay. But we've seen a lot of players who actually put in like 130 hours within 2 weeks and kept playing after that. um, so it's been difficult for us to judge. But two things to take into account: it is a new quest line, so the time it takes to do a playthrough, you just add on that again. The other point is there's more end game content that comes with it.
Oh, that was my next question
So
actually. End game
so
content. Okay.
so that will extend on the duration a little bit more than
is
just
there
adding
something you need?
a new quest line, because there's going to be more stuff to do after the quest line as well. And it's also a bit more difficult. So because like lots of players are now used to the challenges and the mechanics of Outward, so it made sense to challenge them a little bit more. So by combining those 3 different aspects, I think the duration will be more than what people can expect.
That brings us to my next question actually. When you made well, how I'm going to ask this? The original design of the game, right?
Mhm.
Did you had in mind that when you had the idea for Outward that it's going to target the specific audience of gamers? And yeah, that's actually the question. Do,
Oh yeah,
because it's
definitely
rather
yes.
specific, but it managed to. What's really impressive to me, at least, it managed to gather a really strong community and dedicated players, and that's actually really hard to do in general.
I think that one thing that helped us get that community was how we're unapologetic about what Outward is and what it isn't. And that means that the players who enjoy it a lot, and those who don't like it, they really don't like it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it
There's
sucks
no
that
middle ground
sometimes
here,
people are not
right?
happy with what you're doing, but um, at, at the end of the day, I don't really care about them. I care about the players for who Outward is, and I care about them first. And I don't want to give that core audience a lessened experience just to try and grasp everyone around them. That's not what Outward is about. That's just how, not how I am as a person in general. I can express some opinions that will be disagreed on by a lot of people, but the people who are agreeing with me will know that I'm fully on their side. Um, and Outward was thought this way. The idea was always gamers who are much more experienced, who are tired of always being like treated like they are less intelligent than they are, less able than they are, and who just wants a game that trusts them. And that was actually one thing that I found really cool was I presented a game to Ubisoft Montreal. They did something called the Series Indie, which is a
Okay.
very cool initiative of them just to see different uh, projects from indie companies, and they had a prize money. And we didn't win when we participated,
Okay.
but they did say that the one thing that was the key takeaway from the design behind Outward was how it trusts the player to get it. And we're just like, they find that scary because they're so used to aiming at very large audiences,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
they have to kind of always find all the fail safes. And I said, like, literally, screw that.
Yeah,
If they need a
let's aim the
failsafe, maybe they're
specific
not the
audience.
audience for this game, and we're just gonna accept that some of them will be frustrated. And even myself, sometimes I'm frustrated with a game, but
Yeah,
that just makes me
that's
play it even
normal.
harder
Yeah,
because I'm
yeah,
not gonna let the game win. And I'm sure that just saying that, there's a lot of people in your audience right now will get it. We like, oh yeah, totally, that's me, and that's who Outward is for.
yeah. Like I said, it's really hard to aim for a specific audience and actually succeed to gather a strong community around your game. Actually, a lot of AAA games are failing to do so in the past couple of years, uh, with huge budgets. So
Hmm.
the budget is okay. Okay, of course, it's important, right? But it's not. It's not the first thing that should be on the focus,
Yeah,
right?
for a budget to
In the focus.
get you a big community, it has to be a huge budget.
Yeah,
Like, we're talking Apex Legends kind of budget.
yeah,
Now you're gonna get a community for sure. But will you keep them? Will people talk about it? Will they feel like that game was for them? And that's one thing. Like, my favorite games are not the most polished. They almost
same
never
here.
are.
Same here.
My
Yeah,
favorite games are when, like, any time of the day, I'll take a game that I would even myself rate as 70%, but those 70% are made for me, rather than a game
yeah,
that I would myself like review at 90%, but it will still not be affecting me emotionally as strongly because the audience was anyone, not me. And I'm like that with books. I'm like that with movies. I want art that speaks to me directly, and to do that, you have to make some hard decisions, and those hard decisions can't go mainstream, and so you have a lower budget, so you get like Eurojank and stuff like that, but you get a game that was made for you.
yeah,
And
yeah. Exactly, exactly.
that's how you feel like there's a connection, there's a dialogue between the player and the game, because this is about them and no one else.
Yeah, I totally agree. But so I'm really glad that you guys are actually targeting specific audience of players, and people either really love Outward or actually hate it. So
Yeah.
I think that that's actually good, and there is no middle ground here. It's not like eh, it's okay, or it's bad. Oh, it's great, or oh, it's terrible.
Yeah,
So
and sometimes we find audience of people
you need
who are
to
maybe not the
improve your fall
target,
damage, man.
but they like it anyway. Like, they discover what other people like in those games because we didn't hide away from what we were.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I think that someone asked, uh, are you planning to add any form of fast travel in the DLC or the game in general? That was one of the questions that pops up almost everywhere and on my
Yeah.
videos and on your streams as well. So
And
it
people
will be
are asking
interesting.
for mounts as well all the time.
Oh yeah, that would be my next question as well. Okay,
No mounts. No
no
mounts.
mounts.
I
Okay,
can tell you that much. As for fast travel, as we said, there's technically the Caravaneer. It was gonna be
Caravaneer. Okay,
the Soroborean Caravaneer that you can pay to bring you to Harmattan, and then from Harmattan, well, what do? You gotta pay the Caravaneer back if you want to go to
maybe
a
something like
different region.
Skyrim's version of Caravan.
Not exactly, no.
Okay,
Not
so
as
no
not
load
as
screens.
not as much ease of use, we could say.
Uh, Kind of interesting because I mentioned Skyrim. I think that you mentioned in one of your streams, and this was like maybe before the game released or something like that. When we talked about, I have a video where I talk about character progression in RPGs,
Hmm.
and I think I heard you say that you took some inspiration from Skyrim when it comes to how leveling works, because we know that there is no leveling in Outward,
Hmm.
and what I want to know, was that the plan right from the beginning? Uh,
It wasn't.
Come again?
It was not.
It was not. You actually planned to include
Initially,
levels, right?
yeah. Initially, we were considering adding like skills that would get better over time. Like as you use them, it would increase. It would give you experience points that you could put in
Improve use
different.
system, kind of
Like
like Skyrim.
when you were sleeping, you could choose also to do training
Okay.
instead of just repairing or guarding or sleeping. And that training was to choose in which skills you wanted to invest some points. And eventually, that system got rather cumbersome, especially when playing multiplayer, where when someone wants to have a level up, they actually need to have someone else waiting for them. And also, it like it was like it would be a very big system to develop, to which we were not sure would be adding that much value compared to just having the skill trees themselves. And the skills like really do define your character, and so we didn't feel like it was necessary to add that more granular progression. And by cutting on the grinding as well, it kind of helped make the characters evolve faster, which was also a good thing once again, because we want the characters to be ready sooner for endgame content, because it's a game about replayability.
Yeah.
If every time you start a new character you need to put in like 100 hours to reach your max level, you won't do 3, 4, 5 different characters. But when it takes you like 20, 30 hours to get a game completed, well then you can try again more than once, and not get tired of the grind.
Yeah. When you mentioned that end game, I don't know if I already asked this, but maybe I didn't. So again, the topic about the DLC. The end game is planned for the DLC, right? If you guys don't know, there was a huge patch for the base game that
Hmm.
added bunch of end game bosses in the game. So there is specific content in the game that is aimed towards high, I won't say high level players because there are no levels, but high level characters end game, right? And the DLC is supposed to have similar content, right? Similar
Yes.
endgame content.
So the content that was added in the game post launch, there's the equivalent that's going to be in the DLC at launch.
Okay, okay. That's actually great. And when it comes to the end game, at least my impressions of the enchanting was like an element that's going to be the most useful for end game content. Maybe that's wrong. You correct me if I'm wrong, but because I think you said that you need a lot of resources in order
Yeah.
to experiment with different enchants, right? So
Yeah,
that
that's
sounds to me
correct.
like it's meant to be used for the end game.
Yeah, it's going to be one of your end game goal for sure, to kind of finish enchanting everything that you're using.
Okay, okay, that's what I thought actually, and I'm going to get killed, but actually
Yeah, you got a lot of people angry at you.
let's have some fun. I think that somebody asked, will no, Theo Gata asks, will there be another patch before the DLC?
Um, we're not sure. Probably. Like there's been an issue with stuttering, and we've kept working on it. With every patch, we kind of fixed a little bit of it, but the biggest improvement was definitely when we moved to
From new
from Mono
Unity,
to L2
yeah.
CPP. It's just another way of building the game in Unity, and we still encounter some of those issues. So if we add DLC, it's not going to be content. It's just going to be either quality of life, balance, or fixing bugs. That's what people should be expecting.
Okay, nice. Let's pick some random questions, shall we? How about how about Danny says, "Oh yes, love the hard bosses, needed them." So that's great. People seem to enjoy the endgame content, and I think the endgame content in general is something that gets overlooked in RPGs in general.
Yeah, because RPGs are often very much about the journey,
Yeah,
and there's this, like in our case, I had not anticipated how much people would want endgame content, to be perfectly honest. But once again, because we wanted the game to be replayable. But now that we see how attached players are to Endgame, we want to add it. But there's this mentality in development where some people say it's not worth making content for only like the 10-20% of your players that's going to reach the end. Whereas I'm usually thinking the opposite. The players who are the most dedicated to your game, they should be the ones who get like the cool gifts, because
yes.
they stuck with your game to the end. They deserve to be rewarded and acknowledged for being more invested in your game. So in that sense, I guess end game content always makes sense.
Even
And
before
that,
those endgame bosses, there were still a couple,
yeah, there
at
was
least
still
a
some stuff to
couple
do.
of
Like
really challenging
that
bosses in the game. Maybe people,
that
a lot of players won't even get to find them, I guess.
yeah.
But
That was the purpose of the two lich bosses, for
yeah,
instance.
yeah,
But we realized that people were already like they were completing the lich before starting the main story. We're like, oh shit, people really want those tough
I
bosses.
didn't make
And,
it run on the gold lich in one of my
yeah,
tutorials actually.
exactly. So then we realized, yeah, we can just add more content, and that was one of the most cost-effective way to bring new content to the players who are doing those boss fights.
My weapon is totally broken, and I think I lost my backpack. Is this a bug, Guillaume? Is this a bug?
You left your backpack at the entrance of
Yes,
the.
I know, but there is. It's nowhere on the map. Oh wait, I got.
Hmm.
Uh,
Well, I don't know about that.
Thanks, Bob.
You'll have to win
Thanks,
that
Bob.
fight.
Thanks for the $2, man. And he asks, Bob asks, any new character customization? I want new
I want new hair.
haircuts.
Uh, the
Thanks a lot, Bob.
I don't think so. It's a very good question.
People
But
like character customization, and
yeah,
one
they
usual
do.
criticism for Outward is that characters are ugly.
Yeah, it's very
And
fair criticism.
you think
Um,
you know why I don't care about that stuff? I think I mentioned a couple of times because I usually get to wear a helmet like this, so problem solved for me at least. But a lot
yeah,
of people
but
are.
that's a good question,
Yeah.
and sadly the answer is no. There's not really new character
Is
customization
that
option. We
because
we
of
really focused on new armors, like new stuff that
Yeah,
you can
I
wear
think
that's gonna change your
that's good.
appearance. But like he's right that it would make the game better to have more character options as well. I agree with that.
Is
But
that mostly because of the technical limitations, or just focus
yeah,
better things?
we have a very hard time for technical reasons to add more variety of appearance for faces and hairs and stuff like that. But yeah,
Game, I want my backpack back. Where's my
well, stop
backpack?
fighting things and look for it.
No, I have to die, I guess, and spawn in the city or something. Uh, yeah, okay. More beards, someone said. Dusty, more beards. More beards would be great. But yeah, you already got an answer for that. Anyway, the next thing I want to talk about, I wanted to ask. Okay, maybe somebody will ask some question. Ask my question. What was your question, man?
Yeah, I don't know
Thanks.
what his question was. Oh, we
Thanks for the
release more than
$2.
two-player mod.
There, can I answer that? There is a popular mod for Outward that lets you play with more than two people. I think it's actually unlimited, right? You can play with a bunch of people, but it's basically impossible
Yeah,
to balance that
it removes
properly,
the
right?
cap.
Yeah,
It's
it
true.
just
The
it just
mod
removes the cap.
that's been done, but it's not done by Nine Dots. Like it's a mod. It's
Yeah,
done
it's a mod,
externally.
community
But
mod.
no, we're not gonna add more players. When we started designing the game, we knew it would be between 2 and 4, and there really was no way we could find where it would still feel as threatening to be playing with 4 players as it is when
Yeah,
playing
the
alone
original
or
plan
even with
was
two
to
players.
play with up to four players, right? Those older
Yes.
trailers had more than two people in them,
Yeah,
right?
there was one trailer that showed that you could play up to 4.
Yeah, I remember that.
But what wasn't like it was a pre-alpha sneak peek thing more than a trailer really. Um, and we just we couldn't make it feel good is all.
I think it's maybe it's the biggest problem is probably the balancing, right?
Yes,
And
definitely.
maybe the I don't know the performance issues and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, let's see some. Will the game be harder even on two-player hardcore? It's too simple. Somebody says it's too
Yeah, that
simple.
that's
Okay, that's interesting.
well,
Did you
there
fight
gets a point where let's say you
endgame
have
bosses,
two
dude?
players who know how to use the kick and they use heavy weapons.
Yeah.
It can
Thanks
get
for the
pretty
$5,
simple.
Danny.
It can get pretty simple, but at the same time, like this is where we have to choose what's the most how can I say, like what's the right balance between like making the game harder. Like there's a lot of people who enjoy the game but are not necessarily as skilled, and you will need to use say more traps or like use the more powerful items to be able to win even like encounters that aren't supposed to be that difficult. So that's where we got to find the right balance. And I know that it sounds like I'm contradicting myself when I was saying that we are making the game for a very specific audience, but that specific audience is not necessarily only about difficulty. It's about being punishing when you fail at understanding the principles, more so that making the principles difficult to understand, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense, at least in my opinion. But we have a bunch of questions here that I have to ask you now because people donated. Thanks a lot, guys. Uh, Sved asks, uh, actually, it's a demand. Give the consoles options that the PC players have. I think he's referring to character slots, right? Because consoles, correct me if I'm wrong, have limited character slots, right? Or
But I think he means like giving console the option to have multiple players, more
oh
than
yeah,
2 players. But it's a mod, like it's not supported by the game, so it wouldn't make sense.
okay. Here's my question before we continue with chat question.
Yeah.
Uh, was there any feature that you personally really wanted to include in the game, but you couldn't do it because of the technical limitations, or
Well,
basically any other problem?
it was more a
Except
budget
the new areas,
limitation.
except new areas
Yeah.
that we talked
Yeah.
about so far.
It was more a budget
Yeah,
difference, but I
budget.
would have liked to have some kind of aging of your character, and
Oh,
that
that's really
eventually would
interesting. Oh,
and have to retire your character. Like
uh,
the legacy system would have been linked to the fact that, all right, this player is done, he's now retiring, and now you can give the legacy to the next game that you're gonna do. So that aspect of like the final moment of saying this character is done, so now you can move on to something else. And what that would have done is that character is over, but you can still use him to join someone else's game, but your own game is complete.
I'm completely
And
dead.
I thought that would have been a cool feeling. Um, but it was a lot more resource than gameplay interaction to kind of put it together. So we had to drop it. But that would have been, I feel, something very cool because it would have this, when you play Fable and you start from being a kid
Yeah,
to having the big
being
beard
an old man. Yeah,
and being
I
an old
remember.
man in the end. Like I like that, and I would have liked to give a feeling a bit similar to this. Initially, the game was, we tried to have this kind of slogan of an adventure life simulator. We ended up dropping it because
Because it's too.
adventure life
Yeah.
simulator just meant something so different to everyone that it wasn't a good way to communicate what the game actually was. But that idea of adventure life, with the fact that you go from start to finish, that would have been really cool.
Somebody asked for more ranged builds. Are there any plans? I mean plans. Are there any new bows in the new DLC?
Yes, they are.
Oh, nice. Okay. Who is this? Angelo asks. Thanks, Angelo, for the $5. And he asks, will the weapons be customizable, and will the mods be back on the modders, or the modders need to make new ones? I already missed the combat HUD. Well, that's actually already been answered, and Guillaume said that it's really hard for modding, because with basically each new major update, the mods you already have had will get messed up, because for obvious
It
reasons,
it,
right?
it can be. It could stop working, but not necessarily. But every mod is the responsibility of the modder that made them to kind of maintain it. Is how I see
Skyrim
it.
has this problem as well, even though it has like a ton of mods. With each
Yeah.
new SKSC update, previous mods gets basically almost completely. I can't move here.
Yeah, it happens. There's someone else, this Bob who asked like the option to eat his. You want to have
Oh,
the
yeah, I
option to
wanted
be
to
a
ask that
cannibal and
as
eat
well.
his
Yeah,
enemies. No, probably not.
that's like
And
cannibal
that's one.
build. Maybe it will be fit for a hex mage or something.
Yeah, that's one thing. Like Outward is giving the player a lot of freedom in how they do stuff, but they don't give you the freedom to be insanely evil.
Yeah,
Um, Simply because the options for that are very complicated and disruptive to make, and they're not necessarily fun. Like in Skyrim, sure, you can play an asshole, but the truth of it is you're
you
just killing your
can
gameplay.
you can
Like you're killing the
play an
shot.
evil character, but you basically don't have a lot of dialogue options for that. Actually,
Yeah,
it's like
you
it's kinda
just
asshole, but yeah, not entirely. So
yeah. So
maybe by killing just every random NPC, right? But
yeah, and even then, like
it's really
a third of
unpredictable.
them will not really die because they're supposed to be associated to a quest, and they didn't like that is one of the things that I really liked in Morrowind. Was like you could kill someone that would fuck up your main quest, but that was your problem.
Yeah,
Um, and that is something that I feel was lost with how Oblivion and Skyrim handled it. I personally think it was a mistake on their part not to give that freedom to their players. I just don't think that the players they are trying to please by not allowing you to kill everyone are actually happy about the difference, and the unhappiness for the players who would have wanted to have that freedom is much stronger than what they try to preserve from more casual players, I think. Um, but probably that they know their audience better than I do too. But
yeah, but
man,
just in
that
general,
Morrowind feeling when you kill a guy who's like, "Oh, you killed someone from the main quest," like, "Oh shit, I fucked up."
I
I
think
love that.
that's becoming a really old feature, and developers probably think that modern gamers are maybe not ready for that. When something like that happens, they'll be just, I'll just play another game or something. I won't start again or something like that.
Yeah,
It's really hard
but
to implement those features without giant consequences,
yeah,
because
it
you can
is.
lose a part of your player base just because of that one feature. Thanks,
Yeah.
Danny. And Danny asks again, increase spawn rate. I don't know what he
Probably
specifically
not.
means. Maybe
Yeah, it
general spawn
means
rate.
the rate at which you encounter enemies, and so that they respawn, they don't stay dead and stuff like that. We're not gonna change that because because of the level of difficulty of the game. Of course, some players have an easier time with it than others, but we don't want the game to be constantly attacked. Like, let's say you want to go to a dungeon and come back, but you know that the trek to get to that dungeon and coming back is as dangerous as the dungeon itself. It just becomes too strenuous. We want the challenging parts to really be in the dungeons. It- like from a design perspective, we're happy with the current balance of the number of encounters that you have, and also the more you like. For some players, they would like to have more uh, creatures to fight, but for others, like they've already killed a bunch, they're getting tired of it, and it makes sense to encounter less. And at the end of the day, if you want to reset your encounters, you can just sleep for a week at the inn, and you're gonna be fine. You're gonna have all those encounters back already.
Yeah, I don't have problems with spawn rates in general, but I can see why people would like more increased spawn rates. And a question that's kind of related to that, somebody asked, said that it would be really interesting if we could encounter random NPCs on the road that will give us quests. So maybe traditional RPG features like that.
I
What
understand the
about that?
question, but that was part of the discussion we had internally. Was first we want outward, like the world of Ori, to feel like it's super hostile. So if you frequently encounter people outside, it kind of contradicts that reality that being outside is supposed to be exceptional in some way. The other aspect is because of the way we do memory management to allow split screen, and especially split screen where two people can be super far away, we have to load the full region in the memory to make that possible. And that includes a number of encounters. So if we had more, let's say we add an NPC that you can talk with, well, that would be one monster encounter less on the map. Um, and we felt like we could be losing control of a few things. Like
I
that's why the Soroborian Caravaneer is the only exception to that. And also it gives more value. When you see the Soroborian Caravaneer in the wilds, you get this oh yes moment, and we don't want to cheapen that by making NPC encounter more common.
I actually think that adding those random NPCs on the road with quests would kind of ruin the whole theme of Outward, actually, which is kind of weird to say because I usually really like random encounters in games, and in a game like Skyrim, for example, there is a really interesting mod that adds a bunch of new and interesting random encounters in the world. And I think that's one of the things that will make the game more believable, but it's always a double-edged sword, because if you play that game a lot and you encounter those same encounters again, it can become repetitive, right?
Yeah, I tend to agree. And once again, it's not that it would necessarily be a like a bad thing. Well, it would be a bad thing to some players, and it would be a different vision, not the vision that we had. But let's say, and I'm not saying we're working on, by the way, don't go cray cray on this, but let's say we were working on Outward 2. We could try and
you
like
you shouldn't say that.
we could decide to rebalance the experience a little bit and have more encounters with NPCs, and maybe we would be making technical decisions that would make that less of a compromise as well. But for the first Outward, don't expect that to be something we change.
Okay, Sebastian asks, is there any will there be any new starting zones for new classes? That's kinda.
Man, I wish. I
That
wish.
could that could
That's
be
that.
really cool. That would actually
Yeah.
be really cool.
It's one of the coolest Skyrim, right? Alternate starts. That's definitely
Thanks,
something I
Angelo,
would
for
have
two
wanted.
dollars, and thanks, Sweet, once again. I will ask your questions. Sorry, Guillaume, just had to
Yeah,
say something.
but it's sadly it's not the case because our stories for the first quest lines are really based on the fact that you come from Cierzo.
Greetings,
Like
friends.
Yeah,
Oliel
yeah.
is in Cierzo, Risa is in Cierzo, Izan is in Cierzo. So if we were to do an alternate start, it would make those quest lines
Yeah,
less
it would be,
relevant
yeah,
unless we rewrite and rechange
entire
all those
story,
quest
which
work,
will be crazy,
and that
right?
would be very
Crazy.
difficult. It like the amount of work there is not to be underestimated, and those systems are already very rich, very complex. There's a lot of moving parts, and adding to that
Hey there.
would there's such a strong possibility of adding like progression breaks and scripting bugs and stuff that like let's say you want to add 10% more, it would make things like 30% slower for development and stuff like that.
Yeah, a
It'd be
lot of
very
work in
complicated.
general. It would be a
But
lot
I
of work.
do agree. Like if there's one thing for all that we said about the importance of replay value for Outward, like alternate start would have made so much sense, but it was just too difficult for us to pull off. But it's it's one of the features I would have liked most to add in the game.
Somebody asked for HDR support. I think Angelo. Yeah, thanks, Angelo. He asks, is it technically possible to add HDR support?
I don't know much about that. I guess yes, because it's an engine thing more than a studio thing, I think. But I don't know much more than that. I think it's because we were using a too old version of Unity when we made the game.
What can I
Maybe
do?
that by mm, mm,
All right.
maybe that by making the build engine more
All right.
current, it could become a possibility to add HDR support. But I think that even the way we made the assets don't lend itself necessarily well for that, like the how we made the textures and the models. But
Mhm.
I don't know. This is a level of expertise that's beyond me. I'm really bad at all those questions about
Okay, but
graphical
you tried. The
technical
the answer
specs.
was good enough. Okay, here's another question. Uh, 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 can we see more love for Igor asks? Can we see more love and buffs for chakrams in future? I think there are some interesting builds that you can do with chakrams right now. Right? It depends on what you're
Well,
going for.
I did say that you could enchant anything that includes enchanting your chakrams, so
Okay,
that
okay.
will
So you really
necessarily be a
meant
buff
everything.
itself.
Okay.
Yeah, and there will also be new chakrams. So that's the moral of right there.
Okay, nice. Okay, let's see some more interesting questions. Okay, out for two confirmed. Yeah, pretty much.
No, I have not confirmed any such thing. I don't even know myself.
Who is this guy?
There's church who ask about transmogrification of items
Oh yeah,
to
I missed that one. Sorry, man.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, but the answer is no, and this is a design decision. I like the fact that you have to choose between your aesthetics and your stats. Like this is making things uh, more heart wrenching. A good choice is a choice that's hard to make. Like I sometimes would choose to wear something that is not as good because I prefer the look, and you just gotta live with that choice.
I
I like
actually,
it that way. I don't
I
want it to
actually
change.
totally agree with you on that because one of the features that kinda, well, I won't say ruined World of Warcraft, but it certainly made it different from before is the transmog system because while it's really cool that you can transmog all of your armor pieces and look cool, right? You lose that feeling of wow, look at that guy in that
Yep.
S11 armor, or maybe people won't know what I'm talking about if they didn't play WoW, but uh, it's basically prestige tied tied to your appearance, right?
Yes, I agree. And as someone who played Final Fantasy 11, that was the thing. Like you would see someone and right away you'd be clicking on check and you could see exactly what it was that they had equipped. And so some armors were more common than others. Some armors were extremely expensive. And yeah, there's just this aspect of um, Outward is a very realistic game in its approach. Like not that everything is realistic, but we try to take like between two decisions, we tend to take more often the decision to go for a more immersive and realistic
He says
approach.
as I'm walking as a skeleton with my bony sword.
Yes, yes. But you know what I mean. Where we're making some decisions where, especially in the main components of the game, sometimes we do things that are more funny, like having a pizza shot crime and stuff like that. But
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not the main components of the game.
Easter eggs.
Like the main
Easter eggs,
components.
spoilers.
Yeah, it's more Easter eggs and stuff like that. So yeah, the changing appearance of armors did not fit with that, and also it doesn't tell the same story. Like I like that everything that you're wearing is telling a story of what was your adventure for that character.
A lot of ARPGs, like I don't know if you're familiar with Grim Dawn or Path of Exile. I don't know actually about a lot of Path of Exile, but I played a lot of Grim Dawn, which is another really great ARPG, like Diablo-like RPG. And I think that transmog system is being really pushed in almost all RPGs, and I'm not entirely sure if I really like that. I would like to see maybe it should cost like really stupid amounts of money to change the appearance of your gear, or maybe some, I don't know, maybe even then I don't think it will be great, but I understand why people like it. I like it as well.
There are good reasons to like it. There are good reasons to not like it. So it's just like, what kind of developer are we? What is the vision behind this game? Like, it's possible that maybe a future game would have that transmog option, but it will probably not be a good fit for Outward, is my opinion. And as a creative director on the game, that kind of tells whether or not we're going to be doing it in the future.
Yeah. Same thing, somebody says same thing in Monster Hunter World.
Yes, totally.
Sorry. Yeah, I just came into one really interesting place, and I won't spoil it, but if you didn't play this game and you come here at a different time...
Oh, you're not spoiling it at all, huh?
You might be able to go down there, okay?
Come here at night.
Okay, yeah.
There, I spoiled it. I dared.
Yeah. He also basically confirmed Outward 2. I'm joking.
No.
It's not confirmed. One really interesting thing when you actually mentioned Outward 2, it was one of the questions that I had in my head was, it's not logical to me that this whole world is so huge, right? Even with the upcoming DLC zone. So I was thinking, right, Outward 2 is basically going to happen in maybe in a couple of years. And can you talk a little bit about your future projects? It doesn't have to be Outward, just plans for the future when you're done with Outward.
Well, I mean, of course, the idea of making Outward to make sense, but there's also other games that we could want to make. One thing that is pretty sure is that we want our next game to also be an RPG.
Oh, that's great. Okay, you almost had me worried there.
That's the one thing that I feel is really, well, it's not even set in stone, because sometimes you have like different opportunities, but like the first game was a 2.5D platformer. The other game was a online space combat sim, and then we made an open world RPG. We really jumped from one genre to another. This time around, we want to stick to something and reuse our talents and what we learn and get better at it, because we feel like we've really found something that we could do that other studios would not do or could not do in the same way, and that's the motivation we need to keep doing that. So yeah, next game, probably an RPG. Will it be Outward or something else?
Who knows, right?
I'll let you guess. Yeah.
Bob, thanks a lot. Thanks again, actually, for the $5 donation. And Bob actually asked before, but I forgot I forgot to ask you. Are there any plans to include rifles? I think it was the question, and he now asks. I'd like to have the option to have a flintlock rifle and have a class that hit hard from a distance. What about that?
I mean, we've already announced with RD the classes like the Hex Mage and the Speedster are neither of them are about flintlock rifles, so it's probably not what he wants to hear, but that's the gist of it. You might want to show them the two different thingies that I sent you.
I almost forgot about that.
Before taking more questions.
Yeah, for sure. So what happened before the stream? Guillaume actually sent me a sneak peek into our two new classes, the Speedster and the Hex Mage. It's actually just two screenshots, but I will show you guys what it's all about. So exclusive preview, right?
Yes.
Just let me figure out how I'm going to do this. Can I actually show the pictures on stream, or will I just read the... I'll actually made a video about that, and you can see all of the information there. So there I said it, but I will just show you on stream as well, because it was a big surprise that Guillaume had for the stream. So that's great. Okay, so I think I'm safe here as a skeleton in the winter. Why not?
You can also pause the game, you know.
Yeah, of course. I knew that. Okay. Let me see if I can actually bring these two pictures on the stream, or I'll just read the skills. So it's actually just the Speedster. So we got three pre skills that don't require a breakthrough point. Two of them are passive, right? And one of them is active, which is probe. It's required any melee weapon, a weak attack that increases alertness level on hit evolves into a stronger forms of alertness level rises. Did I say it right? No? I probably butchered.
You're saying alertness instead of alertness.
Alertness, yeah.
The state of being alert.
Yeah, my fans are used to my poor English skills, so whatever. Alertness. So a weak attack that increases alertness level on hit evolves into stronger forms of alertness level rises. So probe. That's the first spell that you get as a trickster, the Speedster.
Yes.
And you have we have three skills that require a breakthrough point. Two of them are active, and two of them are passive, which are the strongest abilities in the tree. So more about that in the video, because I apparently can't show you these pictures. Anyway, or I don't want to. I'm joking. Anyway, the next picture is about the Hex Mage.
No, it's not. It's not. Pictures I sent you.
Oh, it's the two picture of Speedster. Sorry, my bad. I was actually sure that it was about the Hex Mage. Anyway, let's see here. Oh, another skill. Prime skill. For this skill, you will need a breakthrough point. So you will need to spend a breakthrough point and 600 silvers to acquire this skill. It removes 3 alertness levels, instantly resets the cooldown of the next skill used in the next 3 minutes. Which is really interesting, and we're going to discuss about this in the next video. I'm joking. So yeah, prime skill, like I said, it's a post breakthrough point skill, and it seems really interesting, but we'll need more info about this in general in order to get the general idea about the Speedster.
But the gist of it is...
Okay, can you explain a little bit better, because I probably butchered some
okay,
names.
So the idea is the Speedster is relying on something called an alert level. And that level of alertness increases as you do some actions. And that's like what the probe skill is for. It's a weak physical attack. Like, it's less good than a normal attack.
Okay.
But if you land a hit, it increases your alertness level.
it's really fast. Those hits are really fast, right? As we could see
Yes.
from the trailer.
So it's not too risky to use them, but they're not very damaging. But if you land it, you get an alert level. And the other skill that we've shown you, Prime, is actually the skill that we've shown during the
Take
dev
Martini and
diary
Danny.
that had some people excited, where you use the Chakram Dance, which is the skill with one of the highest cooldown, and use it twice in a row because you used Prime before. But using Prime removes multiple levels of alertness.
Sorry to interrupt you. I will ask all the questions from the donations, of course, but I'm just trying not to interrupt Guillaume. So we'll get to those questions, guys. Don't worry.
Yep.
And thanks again. Okay, go
So
ahead.
you
Sorry.
have so you have this balance to find between increasing your alert level and then using your alert level for something like, for instance, using the Prime skill, which allows you to use a skill twice in a row. So think about any skill that you like using, but you are limited by your cooldown, and just imagine being able to kind of spam it. You could do 2 Predator Leap in a row. You could one thing I really like. People have been asking for more ways to play the bow and to make it more damaging. So you could do sniper shot and then another sniper shot and then a piercing shot, all like in a row, because now that you can have the Prime skill, you can use that to increase your speed. So I feel like lots of builds will open up because you can focus on making one skill more spammy in a sense, and I feel that's going to be enjoyed for a lot of more expertly done builds.
What about stamina usage when it comes to the speedster? How did you manage to?
The speedster is not using any mana.
He's not using any resource, like no, not mana,
Well,
stamina, no.
he's using stamina.
Yeah.
For some of his skills, like for instance, for the probe skill, it requires stamina. But it's like the main resource of the speedster is the alertness level.
Okay, so the main mechanic is alertness, right?
Yeah, it's
Alertness
about
stacks,
managing
right?
your alertness. Yes.
Okay. Okay, I have to ask you this. Thanks, Martin, for the $10. And Martin asks, in retrospective, in retrospect, what design decisions do you feel worked out as well or better than you expected? And what decisions would you revisit if you had a time machine and the confidence to change? Really interesting question.
Yeah, that's a very good one. I think that the one thing I'm
Wait, why
really
am I naked
glad
now?
we stuck through. What? Why are you naked? I don't know.
I don't know. I was a skeleton just a minute ago.
Why is everything not working?
Oh, that's the question I should ask you.
So design decision. The one thing that really worked is the core idea behind Outward, which was just to go all in on a more believable experience. That's one thing that
I have to
really
restart the
was a
game real
core
quick.
focus.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So that was one thing that, like, the core idea itself was very solid, and I knew that it would connect with a lot of players. The way it was decided was we were just talking at the studio about like RPGs, and the conversation just kept evolving more and more into the things that we would like to do if we were to make an RPG that would be different. And when I realized that everyone was enthusiastically participating in that, I was thinking, okay, maybe this should be the next game, even though it sounds impossible.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds reasonable.
And so I asked Gertuan, our lead programmer, like, is this doable? Like, if we wanted to make a role playing game, what kind of sacrifice would we have to make to make it happen? Like, is that even possible? And he came back like a few minutes later and like, oh, it's possible. And I look at him like, you shouldn't have said that, right? And we just went all in, and we decided, all right, our future project is making an open world RPG. We're gonna go all in like that.
I think you would agree that when you have a smaller developer team, right, you really need to be on point with your actual ambitions and
Yes.
the
Yes.
reality. Like
Yeah,
we previously
like
mentioned,
professionals thought we were crazy, and they really took for granted it wouldn't work.
yeah, it's really hard. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes, to be honest. It's really hard to manage and organize all of that, and you probably have someone from your team mention something really cool, and you end up not putting it in the game because of the technical
Oh yeah,
limitations
well,
or the budget
just
limitations or
like
whatever.
just the snow was an example of that.
Yeah, just the snow, right?
But there's like there are so many things of that. Sometimes I feel like Outward is just half the game of what we plan at first, but at the same time that's true of like so many games. For the other half of the question, like what decision would I revisit? Um, One thing that I feel we haven't pulled out as well as I wish is how food works. I would have wanted food to be a more inherent part of your build, like your diet would really change something.
Maybe that would
And I
be
wanted,
maybe too much. I don't know, micromanaging for the lack of a better word.
I don't think so. I don't
No?
think so. Because one thing that I really like about food recipes is that you do the recipes according to the region in which you are. So your meal will not necessarily be the same in every region, and so your way to play would change according to the resource at hand. That adaptation would have been really cool, I think. And I wanted food to last for longer and to have more effects than just like regeneration of stamina, mana, and health, which is really the most frequent effects. And I would have wanted like part of your physical damage or like a meal that would increase the strength of your fire spells, but not just a boon, like something that would have stacked with a boon to really define your build in that direction. Um, and I think that could have added a really interesting layer to the game. And the reason why it did not happen that way is we just had too much to handle at the same time. There were so many systems, and we were always one or two game designers on the project. I was not even working full time as a game designer on the game because I was too busy just keeping the studio alive.
Yeah.
From the administrative perspective, like
Uh,
we were like constantly facing money issues while making the game.
you actually
And
tried
so
to get. We actually mentioned this before, right? You actually tried to get funds with crowdfunding, right? Kickstarter
yes,
was it, right? And that
yep,
didn't go well, right?
it did not. And even if we had met our objective, it would have only been enough to kind of go to early access, and it would have been an early access. So I'm to an extent, I'm kind of glad it didn't work, but that instead we got the CMF funding, the Canada Media Fund, because that was a more
Guys, I will cheat a
substantial
little bit
amount
here.
of money.
Sorry, I will load my previous save because I totally ruined this one. Sorry,
Yeah,
gang.
I don't know what happened.
I don't know. Don't ask. Because I lost my back. Maybe I didn't lose my backpack, but I lost the icon for the backpack, and it got me really, really mad.
I don't understand. No.
Okay,
I
sorry.
don't.
Go ahead, and then I will ask a couple of more questions from the super chat. Sorry, guys. We'll get to that. Okay.
Also one other thing, like the decision that worked well. The two main ones would be the backpack, like the mechanic of having to drop your backpack to dodge well, and how
The
it
backpack is a
was.
huge mechanic in general in the game.
Yeah, it was a really like that feature. It's one of the very few feature that I actually needed to do some tests to know if people would like it or not. Usually I'm very confident in my choices and why we're making them, but that one I needed to check because I wasn't sure if people would ever drop their backpack, and some players do, some others don't, and that's great. That's proof that it's an interesting choice. The other thing is just the skill systems and how all of the skills are interconnected and they don't have a very direct use. You actually have to combine them with other things to make them work. That is like that's my big baby. That's the thing I love so much about the design of Outward would be that just the skill system and the magic in general.
I didn't imagine that before the game released, there were mentions of the backpack, right? But I didn't really think that it's going to be a huge mechanic in the game that it turned out to be. And to be honest, if you describe this system before the game released to me, I would be probably like, that's probably going to be like too micromanaging or too or too I don't know, it will be
Too
annoying.
gimmicky, maybe.
Yeah, too gimmicky. Yeah, that's the right word. But when I actually started to play the game, I realized that the backpack is a huge mechanic, and I just can't find it. And I know that I placed it somewhere over here because I load my save for previous save, and I still can't find it. Anyway, the backpack, the backpack is a huge mechanic, and it turned out to work great because I think it's right on the edge of being too micromanaging with your pocket and balancing all that carry weight between your pocket and the backpack, because there are some armor sets that will increase your pocket size as well, right? And that was actually really interesting, and I really like watching streams of people that play Outward, and they play some, for example, some healing potions in their backpack, right? And they keybind that on their interface. And once they drop their backpack in the fight, they start spamming that button like crazy, and nothing happens. They're like, "What the f, dude? Why do where's my health potion, right?" And it's in the backpack that you dropped. So really interesting mechanic in general.
Thing for us.
Somebody asked, "Can you imagine to rethink about crowdfunding and try it again?"
Maybe. It's like a crowdfunding campaign is a lot of work, but it's really good for building a community around something. Especially if you already have the start of a community, it can really help us explode and do this outreach of finding even more people who would be interested in the game. So there's definitely a benefit to doing crowdfunding, but we're talking about a very intense 2 months, like of all your resource will be deployed around this crowdfunding campaign. Like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before, during, and at least 1 week after, everything's going to be consumed by that crowdfunding campaign. It's a huge amount of work to do well. And the audience that we're trying to reach out to, like, they deserve that we make that effort and that we go all in. So if we ever do it, it's going to be a very tough decision.
Okay, that's actually really interesting because I wanted to ask a crowdfunding related question, but let's first pick this question from the super chat that I forgot to ask you. Sorry, Danny, and thanks for the $2. Why dual wield for NPCs but not the player? I think we actually talked about that a little bit, or it was something else. About weapons.
He's talking about how Sagard Battleborn uses two axes, right?
Yeah, he can teach you the skill, right?
Yeah, he can teach you a skill.
Not that skill, but he can teach you the skill.
Yeah. Dual wield was just not fitting the system of trinkets and everything. That's one thing that I would like to maybe change in a future title, would be to have more freedom in what you put in what hand, being able to, I don't know, wear 2 shields if you want or whatever. Maybe it could have been nice, but like just the inventory and equipment management and the systems to make you able to kind of swap items and stuff between hands. Like, the menu is already something that was kind of difficult to manage, and dual wield actually comes with a lot of questions. It also a lot of work for animation. Like, I don't know if people notice, but for Sagard Battleborn is not actually dual wielding, it's just holding the other axe but only attacking with the one in the main hand. It's just that because you're not playing him and you're facing him, you don't necessarily notice. So that's just a little cheat that we did. Oh, nice. But having like a different animation sets for when the weapon is in your offhand or your main hand, that's a lot of work.
You actually can kind of play a dual wield build, right? And I actually
with a dagger.
Yeah, with a dagger. And while you can't attack with both weapons at the same time, you can't. You can come up with a unique rogue build, right? That uses a dagger and a sword in the main hand, right? And
yes,
that was actually one of my streams that I did when the game came out. And you can't play like that because there are some really unique daggers and really strong and powerful daggers that you can find in the game without spoiling anything. But you can get some crazy builds with a dagger, and if you manage to actually backstab someone in the game, that is doing a huge damage. Actually,
Yep.
depends on the weapon, of course. But one question: how many people do you think that this trap killed, and similar traps on the road?
Oh boy, I wouldn't know. Maybe a third of the players, maybe of the game, must have died on it. So
You know,
we have already announced that the game sold at least 600,000 copies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all of them played the game and got to the point. So let's be conservative and think about it this way. I'd say maybe 125,000 players decided to go there, and a third of them. So yeah, at least 40,000 players have died of this trap, at least.
you know what would be funny to have that similar. Was it a notice board in Dark Souls 2 that you had for player deaths and do something similar for these traps?
Yeah.
Yeah. There were a lot of questions about not just on stream now, but in general. Can you please give us? I'm quoting a guy. Can you please give us a full co-op experience? And he probably thinks that both players, the host and the guest, should be able to push the story forward, right? Can you tell us a bit more about that design decision in general, and how did you decide to implement it like that? Like the main player is able to push his story forward, but maybe these people don't know that you can actually affect a lot as a guest,
Yeah.
at least on the items, right?
The only thing that is not shared to the player is if there's a skill learned as a reward, well, then only the host is getting that reward. If you get an item or money, it can be split between the players. You can decide who gets what. And so, like, the game is easier when you're playing two players. So sharing the loot kind of makes sense. It's like if you're playing single player, it's a bit harder, but you keep everything for yourself. So there's a good exchange there. But the main point is we wanted the game to we wanted the players to be able to have different builds from different faction lines, quest lines, I mean.
Okay.
So let's say you want someone who joined a holy mission. Well, he's gonna get the infused light skill and some passive skills that Elat can give you. But if you join the blue chamber, well, then you can get that potion to increase your maximum life by 40 points if you do some things in the quest. Like having those very separate passive skills means that your powers will be affected. And if you join someone else's game and they are not in the same faction as you, you would get the passive skill of another faction than your own. And that doesn't make any sense because then you could have all the very strong passives from all the quest lines on a single character, and that is not what we wanted. It just means that you're not really making a hard choice when joining a faction because you can get all the rewards to that one character. So it's literally nonsensical, in my opinion, in a game that has such different quest lines to be able to share all the rewards on a single character.
Yeah, I had to ask that question because that's one of the most common questions on my videos and about Outward in general. I would say why you are not able to push the story forward as a guest, but I don't actually think it's that important. Although it would be nice to have that feature, but like you already explained now, it makes perfect sense.
Completing a quest line is really not that long when you don't do all the distractions around the main quest line. Like if you don't, if you just go straight, it would be a bit boring, honestly. But if you
Yeah.
just do the quest line and just always go directly to
Is
your
there
objective,
something you need?
If you try
doing
to
that
speed run the game,
takes maybe like 10 hours and you have completed the game. So it's really not the main point. That's not what's driving the experience. It's more like how you flesh it out with your own story through all of that.
Okay. Thanks again, man, for the $2 donation, Angelo Lopez. And he has a question: why Oli is not in the final? Oh, okay, those are a bit spoily questions. Should we actually read them?
Yeah, careful about spoilers, man. Spoiler alert! If you don't want to
Yeah,
hear
spoiler
it,
alert.
just cover your ears. Um, unless I'm not mistaken, she can be in the final fight.
Yeah, I just want to say.
But
I
it
think I
depends
saw
on which faction you are playing. Like, you will not be fighting alongside. Like, every time you complete a quest line with a faction, you are actually having allies that are from the other factions to fight with you. But I'm not sure if Oliel can be one of those that join the final fight, or if it's just one of the holy champions. End of
Yeah.
spoilers.
End of spoilers. Okay. Well.
And then be careful with your comments and questions, please, so that the players who have not played the game yet
Yeah.
can,
Yeah. We
can
should
keep
be.
the suspense of what's gonna be happening.
We should be more vague about the questions. About some of those questions, but I really want to ask you. Although those are not that spoiler questions, I guess. I think we didn't have many of them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the questions were on point.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Can we do just a little quick thing?
Yeah.
My sound has been starting to stutter a bit. I'm just gonna leave and come back in the
Oh,
Discord
from Discord. Okay.
chat
Okay.
to
Okay.
just to refresh. You did the
Guys.
same, just to be
Okay.
sure.
Okay. I can hear you. Once again, guys, sorry for the gameplay in general because I'm focusing really hard to ask the right questions, and that's the reason why I'm failing at the gameplay. Yeah, but
They've seen worse, I'm sure.
Yeah, but like I said, I think the focus here is to ask the right questions, and people are really excited about more, not just the DLC, but more content from you guys as well. And just to repeat for the new viewers, the Soroboreans DLC for Outward is coming before summer, right?
Yes.
And the Soroboreans will bring us a brand new zone in the game called Antique Plateau. And quoting Guillaume, this zone is like the 20%, 25% of the vanilla game, right? In terms of content, right?
Yep.
We're getting two new skill trainers, the Speedster and the Hex Mage. And you can expect more information about that in my future videos. Clickbaity on the stream. Clickbait.
Something tells me you will make more
Oh, for sure.
videos about Outward.
Yeah. And yeah, okay, let's maybe pick some random question from the chat. Oh,
Yeah.
or not.
I have only 10 more minutes.
Oh, really? Time flies.
Time flies, right?
Okay, when you're having fun, right? Although I'm not having a lot of fun with my backpack in the game, so.
I'm really sorry about that, man. I had to be there.
Yeah, man.
It's all a conspiracy. You just wanted me to look bad, admit it.
Well, actually, I was expecting you to be in the game, so I don't look that bad in front of my audience because I'm the guy with the guides. So if they're like, look at this guy failing at the game that he makes guides about. Yeah, anyway. Here's another question from the top chat. Thanks, Dave, for $5. And Dave asks, any thoughts on having open world zones in the future that have vast procedurally generated terrain? Oh, that's actually, man, we don't have enough time for all of my questions because, like I said, I wanted to ask some question about the game design in general, and I wanted to ask you some questions about the topics that I usually cover in my videos about mechanics, but I guess we're going to leave that for some other stream, possibly. So let's go with that question.
Yeah, so for the question about procedurally generated
Yeah.
terrain, it's a difficult one. Of course, the amount of content you can get by using procedural generation is much higher. And we've at least experimented internally to find ways to do it. It's definitely doable. It's a very different experience, but nothing definitive about like if that's going to be the future. But like I really do think like Outward could have been with procedurally generated content. It would have been a very different game, but it would not have been a bad game.
Different for sure, really different.
Yeah, it would have been very different.
Yeah,
it would have been very interesting for like the design question and everything. I'm very tempted to explore that. Will I do that in the future or not? I don't know, because there are a lot of things that I'd be interested in investigating more. But yeah, internally we've done very advanced prototypes of procedural generation of content, and who knows if that's gonna be something we're gonna be exploring more in the future.
Okay, nice. We
But
got
what are your next questions? You had
yeah.
you said you had a bit more. Well, like you're the one hosting the stream, you could ask
Yeah, I
your own
asked you.
questions as
I
well.
think I asked you a lot of questions that I wanted to ask you personally, but I didn't want to disappoint my viewers and not include their questions as well. Although a bunch of their questions are also my questions. So yeah, we also have a question from Eric. Thanks a lot for the $5, man. Why just 3 breakthrough skills, and will the DLC allow more? We already mentioned that, right?
Yeah, we already mentioned there won't be more than 3. I feel like 3 is actually generous because it allows you to have like 3 different classes in some way. Um, but the idea was I didn't want the player to be able to have half the game's content within one playthrough. I wanted them to need to have at least
It
3
would be
different
kind of
playthroughs to do it.
chaotic if you could like have, well, four would be maybe fine, but more than that it
Yeah,
would be
but even
really
like
chaotic.
even then, when we're talking about 4 breakthroughs, you're no longer
Yeah,
thinking about which breakthroughs you want, but which ones you don't want.
yeah, yeah.
Like it
For
feels
specific
more
build, for
exclusive. Yeah, it feels more
depends. Yeah.
specific, more targeted when you have less than half of the actual classes that you can choose from.
Yeah, and I think that that only 3 breakthrough points encourages multiple playthroughs and different builds. So more breakthrough points would probably discourage multiple
Yep.
playthroughs, right?
Yep. Exactly.
And as long as you have enough content for actual content for multiple playthroughs, I think that's great. But if what
That's how we're thinking
yeah,
about it.
yeah, I think that's okay. I'm fine by that. I also have to ask you. There was one particular mod that I covered on the channel that added a necromancy tree, and
Yes.
people kind of got excited that they're going to see that in the DLC, and I was
Oh
like,
no.
I was probably misleading people, but I didn't mention the actual DLC. But it came in that time when you announced the Soroboreans, and people were like, "Oh, we're getting a necromancer tree in Soroboreans." I was like, "No, I didn't say that." But okay,
Well,
what do
you
you
know
think
one thing
about
that's
that?
interesting?
Yeah.
Well, one thing that's interesting is I feel that Sinai did a really cool job with his mod because he really got the essence of the skills, like how we want them to work, and he's been like um, making sure that it required multiple components and stuff like that, that they would interact between each other. So I really like that. And like I said, in the expansion, there's going to be the blood mage, well, the hex mage
Hex
that
Mage.
has blood magic. We've shown that there was the blood sigil, and so he's got like a new sigil for necromancy, and we got a
The
blood
red
sigil.
circle, yeah,
So
I
that
talked
so
about
so
that.
that makes it like even more. Um, that makes it even more confusing because they could think that this is what the blood mage does, but it's not the same thing. But of course, it just shows that he got the essence of the design of the skills in the game, that
That's a
it
really
would be
good mod.
confused to see.
Well done. If the guy who made it watch it, if he's watching this, that's a really good mod, and I
Yeah,
hope for
Sinai has been
yeah
like the MVP of modding, really,
yeah
and
yeah yeah for sure.
yeah, I mean, he gets it.
Okay, here's an interesting question. Thanks a lot for $5 donation, Martin Maker. What's the biggest question you wanted to ask? He asks me, actually. Okay, so it's not a question, man. It's a bunch of questions related to the stuff we usually talk about the channel. So here's one, for example. I talk a lot about the atmosphere in RPGs, right?
Mhm.
And how different features and mechanics in the game that you don't need maybe a huge budget for are making a great atmosphere in the game. For example, I usually mention, I usually talk about smaller in budget terms RPGs. I know you're familiar with Gothic series, right? Gothic series.
Well, I
and
know of it, but I've never played it
yeah,
myself.
I know you never played it, but a lot of people are comparing actually Outward to
Yeah.
Gothic. Although, even though I'm a huge fan of Gothic, I never actually saw a lot of resemblance with Outward, to be honest. But I talked about AI in RPGs in one of my episodes of RPG Mechanics, how AI works, right? And in Gothic and in Elder Scrolls ever since Oblivion, but Oblivion was kind of late to do it, and they were bragging all over the place with their Radiant AI system, right? You're familiar with that.
Yep.
And I talked about how Gothic, the first Gothic game from 2001, implemented the full NPC schedule system, right? NPCs would go to work in the morning, they would go to sleep at night, visit the tavern at night as well. I don't know if you're familiar with this, and that makes a great atmosphere in the game. It's one of the things that makes the great atmosphere in the game. And actually, someone asked a question for Outward before in one of my videos, but it's my question as well. How hard is that to develop, and did you have plans for that, or that's
we always wanted it.
able.
We never planned to do it
That's really
because the quantity
Sorry.
of work, it's not just doing it, it's maintaining it through different systems, to multiple builds. It's never about just making the feature. It's about making sure that the feature survives long-winded development where every new layer kind of makes everything explode. And so, for instance, our quests will move some NPCs around, we'll have some interactions, and so everything that changes can kind of interrupt and disrupt your script and lead to progression breaks, because now the story did not think that maybe you would be doing this at night, and that changes something, or things like that. Like every new systems like that kind of make everything explode when they get in contact with it. So that's very difficult.
It's really hard to code. You're trying to say it's hard to maintain it properly without
it's
bugs,
like
right?
if you make a game just about that, and you don't do
right?
all the other systems, it's not necessarily that complex.
I think
It's when it's intertwined with all the other
other-
systems,
yes,
and that's one thing. Like in Outward, you will notice that the systems are really interconnected together, and that's one thing that I dare brag about is my design for systems usually kind of make them connect to each other and multiply the layers and decisions, and making like resource management stuff like that harder, because you're more torn between, I could do this or that. I'm not sure what is the best choice, because there are so many different factors.
Even though I'm really used to having those systems in RPGs that I play, I didn't see it as a big minus for Outward, right? Because the game was not focusing that much on NPC interaction. I mean, there are NPC interactions, obviously, but it's not the prime focus, right? It's the experience.
Yes. But that's the point I was trying to make, is if we had done it, I would have wanted to make sure I can do it in a way that interacts with the other systems. And that would have made it more dangerous to explode, more difficult to maintain as we go further in development.
Right.
That doesn't mean it wouldn't be interesting. Doesn't mean it wouldn't add value.
Yeah,
but like you would maybe need a different team just to do that for a year, for instance, or something like that.
I think that since I mentioned Gothic, those guys were doing it from the Piranha Bytes team. They were doing it right from the first game, and they're actually probably one of the first. It's actually one of the first full 3D RPG, open world RPG that did it, right? And
that's very impressive, especially since they're not like the biggest.
They're actually a small team as well. So.
I have a lot of esteem for their work. They've done courageous thing. Like I haven't played the Gothic series, but I've played the first Risen and was blown away by how much they could do with so little resource. Yeah,
the first Risen is actually, it's basically a remake of the first Gothic. People will probably hate me for saying that, but it has the first Risen is a really good, I would say, Gothic game, if I can say that. The first Risen did a lot of things right, but after I won't get into discussion of that. I just wanted to ask you.
It could last for another 10 minutes, I'm sure.
Yeah, but that was one of my questions. NPC full daily schedule. Actually, I also talked about Ultima series, and they actually did it way before Gothic, but that was, and obviously huge respect for that. But that was in the era of 90s, right? 2D RPGs. They were still not full 3D, but it was still really impressive. So yeah, that was one of the questions.
It was also super broken.
yeah, I know, I know that as well. But props for trying, right?
For sure. That's how you push forward.
Yeah, but the reason why I'm focusing a lot on full 3D environment is because of the immersion, right? And you see different people moving and doing stuff, pretending to be human at least, right?
Yeah, you more feel like you're there. That's for sure.
It adds points to immersion for sure. So that was one of my major questions that I want to discuss with you, and so yeah, I'm glad I got the chance to ask you that. And do you have the time?
And I'm pretty much out of time.
You're out
yes.
of time, yeah. Okay, so we're
but
at
really,
2 hours.
I want to tell you, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot.
On your
Thanks
stream.
a lot, man.
Thank you everyone who came over and asked your question, for showing so much interest, for all the comments. It's really appreciated. Really feels like what we're doing is like that people are looking forward for what's going to come up next. It's always a pleasure to be able to interact with all of you guys.
Like I said in the beginning, it's really great that you guys doing this. Transparency with your consumer base is always a good thing, and you actually answering questions directly and not dodging the questions is really great, man. And I hope you just continue in that way forward in whatever the next project might be. So
that's how I'd want it.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining the stream, man, and I really hope we'll get a chance to do this again, maybe, and maybe I'll get a chance to ask all of my questions in.
Yeah.
But I think we'll need
sure.
a lot more than 2 hours for that. But yeah, man.
Well, see you for the next one, is what you say, right?
Yeah, that cringy outro and intro are my staples now, so I can't change them. But yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Yeah, it goes like that. Cringe, but that's what it is, right?
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Man. Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining the stream, and once again, thanks a lot for all the donations and all your questions. I know that the gameplay wasn't the main focus of the stream, and I just hope it was worth it. All those questions about the DLC and the game in general, and yeah, that's it, I guess. Thanks a lot for joining. I can't really promise you the next stream because I don't usually stream a lot, as you noticed already. But the main problem is the lack of time, I guess. So yeah, thanks a lot for the questions, and I guess I'll see you in the next one, right? I'm losing my voice, like I can't even talk. It's really hard to talk. Bye, Gothic 2, Heart, the nostalgia, yeah. Bye, Theodore. Bye, friends. Okay, that will be it, guys. I'll see you in the next one, I guess. I actually have a video that I should upload later tonight or tomorrow, I guess. And I hope to catch you there. What can I say? That will be all, guys. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.